Coming to you across all the world's major podcast networks. It's Jonah, it's Greg, it's Ben. We're Zag Talk. Welcome back, listeners. Hey, Greg.
Hey, Jonah. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here. Bringing the podcast back for another episode, another season, I should say. This week, we've got Sam Rojas as our guest. She's fantastic. She's the founding partner of Common Good Strategies. Prior to that, she worked for the city of San Francisco. Did government relations for firms like WeWork, Reef, Replica. Obviously, you can't all be winners. But I think has a really interesting story about how startups, especially the mobility space, can better work with the public sector. So excited to get into that in a second. But before that, we also have Ben Hubbard, editor of Zag Daily, joining us today. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Jonah. How are you doing?
We're doing good. Obviously, something a little different about this season besides the new name, Zag Talk. We're working with Zag Daily on this. So, Ben, give us a little bit of background.
Yes. So, very excited to be partnering with you and Greg on this new Zag Talk podcast. We see this as an opportunity for listeners to hear the most pressing and timely mobility, investment and technology stories of our era. So, Zag Talk, season 1.
And so give us a little bit of background on Zag Daily. You know, I read it regularly. I think anyone that's listened to this podcast in the past knows we often bring in news stories you guys have written. I think biggest, mobility-focused news site in Europe, no?
Yes, I think so, yeah. We've been going for some time. So Zag Daily is a global digital-first media publication focused exclusively on the business of sustainable mobility. So we're called Zag because Zag to us means a sharp change of direction, which is what we feel all businesses need to take if we're going to hit our sustainability goals. So yes, I'm the editor. We've got a team of reporters. We've got a team of world-class contributors. And yeah, we're tracking about 27,000 regular monthly readers now, which it's a figure that we're super proud of. And our readers consist of investors, policymakers, researchers, charities, anyone that's interested or got a stake in the future of mobility.
Yeah, I think that's going to make for a particularly exciting season. And I feel a little ganged up on. We got a journalist, we got a former journalist, whatever Greg is. And me, I just kind of cosplay as one from time to time. So I'm going to have to be really citing my sources this season. But no, I think bringing Zag stories to life with audio, I think that should be fun. We can kind of dig into a little bit of the behind the scenes, how the stories came together, why they're important. And Greg will kind of add his usual charm to them, no?
I mean, if LLM's going to hallucinate, why can't I? So we'll see what I come up with.
I see this as a great opportunity. I mean, we're based in the UK as a publication. And we're often traveling around Europe to report on the leading voices in sustainable mobility. And you guys are obviously, you've got your eyes and ears on the ground in the US. So I think this is such a great opportunity to combine our respective networks so that we can together offer the most comprehensive insights and analysis on sustainable mobility globally, actually. So yeah, I think that's what's truly exciting about this podcast for us.
I think between the power of us three white guys, we can cover the world. And speaking of world travels, Greg, before we get into the hard news, you were doing some traveling yourself, no?
I would say, speaking as a resident Canadian, I, for one, am eager to forge as many bridges as I can with Europe these days. So it's great to have Ben here. But no, I was in Venice for the launch of the Architecture Biennale by Carlo Ratti of MIT Sensible City. I think listeners will know Carlo's work if you know him. He has done robotic cocktail mixologists that I think is very popular in cruise ships. He did the rowboat, a robotic self-driving boat, and has dabbled in all sorts of mobility. And so his whole curation there is really focused on forms of intelligence for climate adaptation. So there were lots of robots, lots of mobility, Lagos markets, all sorts of stuff there. So yeah, like 750 contributors packed into 2 hours of perusing there. My brain's still leaking spinal fluid, but it's pretty great.
The only two ones I want to know about there was the room with all the air conditioners, and there was the giant American porch. How were those two?
Those two, the room with all the air conditioners, the conceit was, which I had to read later, it's a very hot room. And so TransSolar, which is the pioneering Berlin climate engineering firm, they hung the air conditioners so they just blasted hot air. There was no room to actually condensate and then blow cold air. So you're just in a really hot room and wondering why all these air conditioners are hanging there. Great idea.
It's a metaphor.
Execution. Yeah, the metaphorical execution. The porch, though, is great. And for listeners, actually, this goes back to really our core work here. The American Pavilion, if you're familiar with it, is this 1930s sort of federalist infrastructure. And this year, Marlin Blackwell Architects built a wooden porch onto it. And yeah, it was an incredible placemaking exercise. People loved hanging out on the porch. There were great chairs. There was bluegrass music there. And just once again, people don't want architecture. They just want to hang out with other people and maybe a little music. So had a great time there myself.
The last bit of federalism as we destroy it is going to be architecture we left abroad. But obviously, the built environment, mobility interlinked. So let's get to the week's mobility news. This one, kicking things off, it teases me, it tickles me because I feel like I've seen this one before. Greg, did Uber invent the bus?
Well, that's the top headline. I would actually say, and we'll come back to this, that Uber has reinvented the dollar van. But Jonah, what's the real headline here in terms of what they're actually trying to do?
So this came out of GoGet, which is their sort of annual big announcement summit, and they came out with Route Share, which is basically like a mega Uber pool running along fixed routes at fixed headways and at lower prices. And so basically, you show up where they want you, when they want you. That sounds a lot like a bus. I don't know. And then you can also buy a ride pass where if you commit to X number of rides per month, the price goes down even further. On one hand, the urbanist in me likes this because it actually means more people per vehicle. It's sort of the original conceit of all these things. But it's also cream skimming all the people that should be on the bus.
I'm not sure I can sigh deeply enough about this news. A couple of thoughts. Yeah, your point about the cream skimming, it's not a bus per se. It's obviously a form of shared fixed route mobility there. But, buses actually serve networks and are designed to serve various routes to connect people. This is much more like, and New Yorkers get this reference, like dollar vans, which are the sort of informal transit, but that often ride on the same streets as subway routes and other forms of mass transit. And they're just trying to skim, maybe not the cream, but the people who can afford a buck or two to ride dollar vans. And so Uber is, again, trying to ape this. And the second part I have of this is I don't know, Jonah, how many times have Uber and others tried to solve these urban geometry issues by using the sort of algorithmic pickup and drop off? I just feel like, one of these days, will there be enough math to actually create this at a price-effective price point? I don't know. It feels like the unit economics of this are still probably not good enough, but let's see how long it lasts.
Yeah, it does feel like a recession indicator. But yes, to your point, dollar vans in the outer boroughs. I think, Ben, you have various European cities, right? The Matryoshkas in Russia would be a similar kind of concept. I don't know if London, this isn't posh enough for London, I don't think. But I will say, having once ridden a dollar van in the outer boroughs of New York, there's definitely some price discrimination. I think when they see that you're a white dude that's just kind of doing this out of novelty, it's oh, for you, $3.
Yes, as someone who's paid 10x the fare for riding jeepneys around Metro Manila, I definitely know the tourist pricing scheme.
But you're paying for the experience. And okay, so from one of the big guys to another, DoorDash also had some big news last week. And it feels like, we were so close to kind of pulling this out of Stanley at Herbivore, but basically another partnership with Wing, which is Alphabet's drone delivery arm, this time launching in Charlotte, specifically southern Charlotte around a mall. And so this joins parts of Virginia and parts of Dallas-Fort Worth as the Wing DoorDash zones, I think alongside Melbourne, Australia. And so the question is, why there, Greg? What do they have in common?
Well, this is where you did some ace GIS work there with Google Maps here on this. What do they have in common? Galactic ex-urban sprawl, right? Particularly Dallas-Fort Worth, I think, which is where a lot of these pilots have launched here. like that exurban sprawl running the periphery. But yes, your excellent map showing that, what is it? It's a mile as the drone flies from a Panera from that mall, and 3.5 miles on foot or by car as you weave your way around various roads and around a golf course, I believe. So, I mean, this is all of a piece. I think it's one of the various CEOs has said that that 82% of American households live in a suburbia that is sprawly enough that you can do this kind of drone delivery, and this seems like testing exactly the kind of urban geography that would make this work. And it still depends on can they get the FAA approvals without direct line of sight and all the kind of things to bring the unit economics down. But like this is what they're trying to solve here, and it's very American, right? Like, let's not actually fix our urban environments. Let's just dispatch drones rather than actually.
Well, you wanna mess up the 15th hole, Greg?
Yeah, exactly. I do look forward to them dropping Panera death lemonades on unsuspecting golfers.
The hyper caffeinated ones.
Yeah.
It's there's also some regulatory things at play here. Obviously, the first in flight state alongside Virginia and Texas has been very forward with their kind of updating the FAA regulations to allow some of these new uses. But yeah, all of a sudden, fighting gravity makes more sense when the land-based option is very circuitous. I'm curious. I mean, Ben, you guys do see some drone delivery in Europe too, where at least the classic thought is that you have a denser street grid, closer to your restaurants and stuff. So you think drone delivery is going to work out in the old world too?
Yeah, I was just actually thinking. I mean, the US just seems so much further ahead in terms of drone delivery than Europe, particularly in the UK. I mean, we're using the NHS. I know have got some trials of blood tests and transferring blood and that sort of thing. But what Wing's doing out in the US and delivering coffees and over-the-counter medicinal supplies. I mean, we're just not there yet. I would love to.
I don't know if you need to be jealous of us, though.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what I would use it for just yet, but no, I mean, it's so impressive how far the US drone delivery network has progressed.
Yeah, I can't wait till it combines with our highly litigious culture and someone gets a scalding hot coffee dropped on them from 20 feet. That's going to be a nice payday for someone. Just, more things you don't have outside the U.S. But again, speaking of U.S. positive news, transit ridership hitting a post-pandemic high. So new APTA numbers just came out, and nationwide we're at 85% recovery compared to 2019, the sort of pre-pandemic high water mark. And so I think, again, not new, but a continuation of the trend where you're really seeing divergences between certain cities and regions. So robust recoveries in places like New York City, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, weaker recoveries in the Bay Area, Chicago, Boston, Minneapolis. And so there's a couple of things to tease out there, right, Craig? I mean, there's both questions of how central transit is to your city's, mode share. But then I think also some cities have done a good job with funding transit and making sure there's enough operators to actually get the buses and trains running. Others have not. And then also just the classic question of like, how bad is your RTO, return to office stats, right? Like Bay Area, everyone's still telecommuting 3 times a week, so you're not going to be on BART.
Yeah, exactly. Also interesting that the bus ridership has recovered more quickly, which I guess I'm in favor of. I feel like professionals know that you need to have the buses there for the flexibility of that. But yeah, it feels like this is still an interesting, unsettled question to exactly your point there about like where does return to office truly shake out? I'm a believer of the stats that basically it's flatline. This is as good as it gets, which makes me this question: like, will it ever return to 100%? I mean, in the long run, yes, but it may need to be like a generation of another sort of return to the dense urban cores, because all those millennials have fled out to the Dallases and the Metro Atlantas to raise their children and sort of follow in their boomer footsteps. So I wonder, like, where's the ceiling on this? 85%. I mean, you talked to me 2 or 3 years ago, and I would have like taken that in a heartbeat. That's an incredible recovery in those places. But yeah, it is. It just strikes me as this is a very sort of, I don't know, uneven set of results because the policies and the funding models are different. And then, of course, there is the other shoe waiting to drop from the Trump administration with DOT Secretary Duffy. I forget, where is he going on his threats to the New York MTA about congestion pricing? And, will they provoke the urban doom loop by withholding funding if they don't get what they want? So that feels like that's the other big unsettled question here. Like, what if we just want to blow it up because we can? But,
Yeah, and Ben, this is somewhere where we can be jealous of you because the transit recovery is much more robust in Europe, obviously. I think through a mix of both funding reasons and cultural reasons, and probably it seems like more people have returned to office in European cities than American ones. So maybe because people don't hate their commutes as much. I don't know.
In terms of trains and buses, in terms of trains and buses, we also have the most expensive trains in Europe. In the UK, Great Western Railways, you're going to be paying £100 for an hour's trip. But yeah, it's pricey.
Yeah, that's wow. I feel like many in America would be like, well, that means you have a train that you can pay for. So it's grass is always greener, I suppose. But on to robo-taxis. A couple stories this week. The first one, just a little piece. Zoox, which is Amazon's play, just started testing in Atlanta. It's their 7th city that they're now testing in. Classic tit for tat. They announced it one day after Waymo had an Atlanta announcement. It feels like Zoox announcing a lot of cities that they're testing in, but has anyone actually ridden in one? Like, Greg, you've seen every cool form of technology in the world. Have you ever actually seen a Zoox IRL?
No, I've never seen a Zoox, and yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting, this mode right now, right? Of the whole like rush to like, I don't know. It feels like this whole weird pilot phase again here, where we're deploying in all these possible test cities here with no actual timelines or real plans for deployment. This is after, for example, like Uber earlier this month, announced they were going to do it in Arlington, Texas, with May. I'm like, okay, great, but when is there actual going to be deployment at scale on the level that Waymo's actually trying to sort of do? Like, I'm flying to Boston here to give a talk, and like they're very excited that apparently the Waymo Boston rollout is happening here. But yeah, I'm curious about when Zoox and the Mays and the others and Uber, of course, which we can discuss, actually start to catch up to this. But yeah, I don't know. Listeners, if any of you ridden a Zoox, like tell us, like where and when was that?
Yeah. Maybe somewhere off strip, deep in the heart of Vegas.
Yeah.
And so moving on to Luminar, which is a LiDAR maker, they just had some corporate intrigue. So the CEO founder was kicked out for kind of unspecified, just quote unquote ethics issues. Now there's been a big round of layoffs. So this one tickles my heart because longtime listeners might know Greg and I are always on SPAC watch, and this was one of the great SPACs of the the ZERP boom era. So chickens coming home to roost.
It's almost as if they didn't quite have as much oversight as they probably should have had there. Like, who would have thought this was some sort of backdoor into maybe not having the most robust governance procedures? I mean, related to that, my favorite is the board member who resigned, and according to their regulation and filing to the SEC, his decision was not due to any disagreements with the company on any matter relating to its operations, policies, or practices. So, why did he quit?
Me neither.
Exactly? I would like to know why, but I guess we're not going to find out. So,
yeah.
But yeah, the SPAC story just keeps on giving, Jonah.
It's a gift that keeps on giving. Yeah. We are nothing if not thorough. And speaking of thorough, Tesla's robotaxis are due any day now in Austin, Texas. And they're now promising that they're only going to operate in the quote-unquote safest geofence part of the city. I like that because anyone that knows Austin knows that outside of like the 3 neighborhoods that are on the postcards, it's kind of just like a huge strip mall. So they're all sort of, I think, safe from a humongous road standpoint. But yeah, what does that mean? Like, do you trust Elon's assessment of safe?
Okay, well, 2 thoughts on this. One, again, this a long time ago, but I had to help Ford at one point, like turn their NHTSA submissions into something approaching English. So I read up on operational domain design. And so, yeah, so safest will be interesting in this because when we think of safe, we think of like safety from a human perspective. But you're right, it will be the question of like, what is the operational complexity? So you could certainly put it and deploy it in like, I don't know, some sort of galactic sprawl of Austin that is all stroads and all very easy right-hand turns. So it'll be interesting to see what they've arrived at. But the other one is, related to this is like, I think it was on the recent earnings call where like, Musk alluded to how they're planning to like have these vehicles differ from the standard Model Ys that are purchased. And yeah, like the NHTSA has some questions here about what they're going to do with safety drivers and how this is going to work. And Musk is famously, known for his compliance with NHTSA or going along with what regulators ask. So, I don't know. Would you be the first in line to ride in a Tesla robotaxi? Who will be the first in line to ride in a Tesla robotaxi?
I think lucky employees followed by fanboys.
Yeah, so it'll be fun to see who lines up for their to take their lives in their hands here, based on some of the folks who posted their stories about autopilot and full self-driving.
Well, anyone, listeners in Austin, if that's you, please send us a message. We want to know how it went.
We want Zoox riders, we want Tesla riders. Send us some email.
Yep. Okay, and then one more piece. I think gotta throw one out for the startup people out there. A little fundraising news. So Owner.com raising $120 million at $1 billion plus valuation. This feels, are we so back, Greg?
We are so back. This is so zerpy, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah, Series C, led by some of the investors that previously led DoorDash and Toast, so kind of food delivery bona fides, and then a lot of familiar names backing it as well. Kind of execs from Instacart, Kava, Sweetgreen, Grubhub. So investors like to move in a pack, and they seem hungry for Owner.com.
Yeah, this coupled with the other news, in just the past couple of weeks, obviously, like, Wonder raising a huge new round, and, the whole DoorDash delivery tie-up. It's really interesting, this whole space right now. I mean, the whole Wonder thing alone, it's funny, the whole Owner deal seems crazy enough, but that's sort of dwarfed by, like, the amount of money that Wonder just raised again. I mean, over at Matt Newberg's Hungry, or I lurk in the group chat, they had to, like, do a whole emergency call on this kind of thing about what it all means, and yeah, I don't know. You're curious your takes on it, Jonah. Their conclusion for people who are interested is like whether we're going to see a sort of a hotel-style consolidation that crams down restaurants as DoorDash and others try to basically own this relationship. But yeah, it's interesting that at a time of what seems like consolidation, like, here comes another player here. But
yeah, hotel-style consolidation. I don't know. I mean, restaurants are so
fragmented,
localized and fragmented. Yes, other than your kind of fast casual chains, that would be. That's not what I would put my money on, but there's definitely a lot of money being raised. Yeah, Wonder raising $600 million or so. So feels like the space is hot again, which is always fun to watch. But enough America chit chat. See the last week or two.
We recently interviewed the co-CEO of Third Lane Mobility, Stuart Lyons, who they now own Spin and Bird, and it's one of our most read stories actually over the last week. It's been such an impressive turnaround. There's been a $50 million swing on EBITDA over the last 12 months. So we interviewed him, and it was kind of a more general interview. But he was quite honest about some of the mistakes that Bird made in the early days.
There were many.
And Swing and yeah, there were many. And, top line growth at all costs, too many hires, too many markets. But they have gone through this huge right-sizing operation. And, looking at insurance, rents, hardware. I think one of the most interesting things that stood out for me from the interview was, so Stuart comes from a telecoms background, and he was able to renegotiate the SIM contracts because each e-scooter and e-bike needs to connect to a SIM. And he was able to cut costs by up to 80% because they were getting stung on roaming charges. And he said it wasn't quite in the double-digit millions, but close in terms of savings. So, he's obviously had a huge impact on the business, and just an awesome story, awesome turnaround story that we love to report on Zag, and love to be able to to
I
share
like
that story.
they just forgot to get a family plan for their scooters, but no, big picture. To me, this sort of means that the micromobility space has matured. Like, it's no longer speculative. It's like they figure out a business model, and so maybe it's not as sexy, flashy, growth at all costs, but that means there'll be a scooter when you need one.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing so many positive stories now about shared micromobility operators across the globe that are finally finding their feet. And Ride in Norway has been profitable from the get-go. Their Swing in South Korea, which is doing extremely well. although they don't have so much regulations and seem to be able to put as many vehicles on the streets as they want. Donkey Republic in Denmark as well, an e-bike operator that's showing really positive signs. So yeah, I think we've reached a stage now where this industry has figured out how to make money, and so we're going to be reporting on that as much as possible. But yeah, positive
Yeah,
all
and
round.
stateside Lime keeps teasing that they're also profitable too. They don't quite release the numbers, but they say it and they continue to exist, so we have to believe them. But from scooters to bikes and everything else two-wheeled, what about Eurobike this year?
Yeah, so Eurobike, we're reporting on this because the 33rd edition starts next month in messy Frankfurt, and they had over 35,000 people attend last year. I mean, it's quite a number. And I mean, we were recently at the ITS Congress in Seville over the last few days, and they had 3,500 people, and that felt like a pretty big number. So 35,000 is huge. And so we interviewed the CEO Stefan Leisinger, and we talked about how Eurobike is responding to the rise of eco-mobility. Originally it started off as in mountain bikes, then sports bikes, then e-bikes, and now it's moved into this entire urban mobility space, from cargo bikes to microcars. And so they're covering this entire micromobility segment now, and the piece was really showing how they're doing that and what's going to be on display at this year's event.
And then I think you talked about how we're seeing some of the OEMs, car companies, enter the e-bike space. Porsche has e-bike division. Rivian just spun out its kind of mysterious micromobility project. It feels to me like that's something we've also seen in the past. Automakers love throwing things at the wall to show that they're thinking about new mobility and then giving up after 2 years. I remember when there was a Ford e-bike. So do you think it's realer this time?
I do. I've got a feeling that the OEMs are making serious progress now, and investing serious money, and we had a business the other day, Stellantis, which is a Swedish microcar maker, and Stellantis has partnered with Lovely, which is a Swedish microcar maker, and they are now evaluating their light electric flat-packed vehicle technology. And it's been one of the most read stories of the year, actually, on Zag. And we're seeing this more and more. Stellantis is also producing smaller cars, such as the Fiat Topolino, which, again, we think is the response to the growth of micromobility. So, I think this is exciting times, and I think it feels more real
Greg,
now.
I feel like you had a thought at the tip of your tongue.
Well, the Starkey thought is, in addition to our open call here for people who've ridden the Zooks, I would love to know who's ever ridden a Porsche e-bike. I've seen that touted, and I feel like I am in the psychographic for that, but I've never actually seen one. But I did think the Rivian, which we haven't had a chance to chat about, Jonah, because we were on hiatus. But yeah, that Rivian announcement that was greeted so positively and raised so much money for it. To me, that's like the most fascinating mystery right now in micromobility, is what that will actually look like.
What is it?
Yes, and given their ties up into the OEMs. But yeah, the other snarky part of me is, well, also this. I mean, to put a downer on Ben's optimism, I think it was just looking at Bloomberg Hyperdrive noted that European small car sales, micro car sales are actually falling very rapidly. I don't know if crashing is quite the word, but reaching big declines, which was amusing to me as an American over in Europe the last couple of weeks, seeing all the smart cars and seeing all the Topolinos and this whole different mobility preserve. But yeah, maybe in response to the Chinese EV competition, we'll see the European automakers scoot down into micromobility. Who can disrupt who faster?
Or we're gonna force Europeans to buy our big American trucks.
Yes, and in response, they'll switch to e-bikes perhaps. But yeah, the flat pack tech is also very interesting to me too. And again, part of this overall race of who can figure out, when it's all about vehicle architectures, what can we learn from IKEA? What would IKEA do?
The classic challenge that I've always seen with automakers when they try anything that's different, right, is they are sincere about it and they want to do an e-bike brand, a micromobility brand, a car sharing brand, a ride hailing thing, whatever it is. And they do it and it gets a little bit of scale and they're like, wow, we've built ourselves like a $50 million business after 5 years of hard work. And then they realize like, or we could just sell 10 more pickup trucks and make the same amount of profit.
The pressure from the shareholders, whether real or imagined, just crushes that dream. They must look at that Excel spreadsheet and be like, why are we doing this again? So, yeah.
And then one more story that I was actually particularly excited about because, for starters, great name, NG Seed. Ben, tell us about the next generation sustainable electric vehicle ecosystem for delivery.
No, the NG project. For that, the NG Seed project is backed by about 650,000 euros of investment, and it's an EU-led project, and that's what we're finding exciting about this. So the aim is to build a zero-emission delivery system across 6 European cities to start with, including Budapest, Bucharest, and Prague. But it's a collaboration between a number of stakeholders. The first, IT urban mobility. Then you've got e-mobility rentals, which is an ecosystem provider based out of Romania. And then the delivery giants Glovo and Wolt, which many of our listeners will be familiar with. But the project has some pretty ambitious targets. In just 12 months, they're looking to cut last mile delivery emissions by 90%. And reduce operational costs by 50% and eliminate vehicle downtime. When we reported on this, I think the thing that struck me the most was the universal battery system, which is being supplied by e-mobility rentals. And this fits over 20 different types of vehicle. And this is going to save a lot of time. So it could be swapped in under a minute. At solar-powered stations, meaning more deliveries, less idle time and lower emissions. So, yeah, I think this is a project that we are going to be very closely following. And what I like about it is that there are a number of big stakeholders involved, and that it's being led by the
It's
EU.
a little like mobility delivery urbanist dork's dream. So fingers crossed on this one. I think that's been plenty of news. Obviously, much going on in the world of mobility and sustainable delivery. And with that in mind, let's kick things over to Sam Rojas. We're back, and we're here with my friend Sam Rojas, co-founder of Common Good Strategies. Hey, Sam.
Hi. How's it going?
It's going as well as can be, but I'm excited to have you on because, folks, Sam's got a really impressive resume. I mean, mix of public and private, obviously doing your own thing now, which is always a fun challenge, as I know from firsthand experience. Why don't we just start, give us some background. Tell us the Sam story.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll go way back if you
Way
like
back.
me to. Okay, I promise I won't take up too much time here, but I think like everybody who's building their own thing or working, in either the built environment mobility space, has a story to tell around why they care about this stuff. And so it kind of does go back to how I grew up. I was born in San Francisco, but me and my parents, who are immigrants of the Philippines, we moved pretty quickly to the burbs and lived with my grandparents to sort of save money. And so I was in this sort of role and responsibility as a kid where I did a lot of the translating for my parents. I did a lot of the sort of helping them integrate into American culture. I mean, I was like the age of 8 and I was helping my parents quiz for U.S. history so they could pass their citizenship exam. Yeah. And like I said, I grew up with my grandma who she did not drive. And so we walked everywhere all day. And if you've ever walked in the burbs in Southern California, you will know that it is not for the faint of heart, and it's not really easy to get around. But that was sort of my early experience. And then my parents were, they were basically super commuting to work every day. They were working in LA and did something like 2.5 hours every single day. And so even as a young person, I knew something about this picture was very strange. And I didn't have really any answers to why. I was wondering why the commutes were so long. Why are stores so hard to walk to? Why do most restaurants have a drive-through?
All important questions.
All important questions, like as a kiddo, why is it, where's all the cool stuff, and
Which burb we talking about? Let's cast some shade.
let's cast some shade. And I will say there are great things about this particular suburban town, but Chino Hills in Southern California was a new suburb. And so, like all new suburbs, they wanted to be just like the other ones. And there were just tract homes upon tract homes that were built on former farmland. And so not only was it a burb, but it smelled like a farm.
Cows, yeah. I feel like any suburb with hills in the name, you can automatically deduct 10 from its walk score.
That's exactly right. And it was in many ways beautiful in the sense that there was a lot of there was a lot of almost like all of the houses were too similar and all of the buildings were too similar, that there wasn't a lot of visual dysregulation going on. So that's great. But
strong HOA.
Very strong, very specific color palette on these houses. But the short is, I really found my purpose sort of growing up finding answers to some of these questions and finding solutions for somebody like my grandma, who had very little options, very little freedom, and very little sort of economic opportunity as a result of the way that city was built for somebody like her. And I ended up, no surprise, in public service. And sort of having worked at all levels, international, state, and local. Local is definitely where I felt like I had the most impact and where I spent most of my time.
And so on that public service level, you worked in San Francisco, you worked for some Congress folks, you worked at Spur, which is, kind of straddles the line. What were the sort of projects you were implementing?
Yeah, so some of them were project specific, legislative specific, but in general, it was, this is obvious, but it was all oriented in serving the public and answering specific problems that were facing the community. So at the congressional level, in Senator Barbara Boxer's office and Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office, I was working in their district office. And so for those of you who don't know, field staff are like the first line of defense when federal systems go wrong. So I was literally on the phone, helping seniors with their stalled security checks and vets who couldn't see their doctors. And so there was a lot of groundwork that I think is underappreciated and that people don't really sort of appreciate about folks who are working in public service. There were definitely great times. There were low times working for the federal government, but high time. Not like we're seeing now.
I can only imagine how inundated all those phones are currently, as they should be. But
totally.
Shout out to people trying to fight the good fight.
Out to people answering the phones right now. The government had during my time there. The government had shut down once or twice. So that happened, but there are amazing things like the ACA that passed, right? So I have fond memories of setting up workshops to enroll people in healthcare that have never had healthcare their entire life, and getting a handshake from Barack Obama for the work that we were doing in our communities. Shout out to Barack Obama for that handshake. Thank you for that.
Never wash your hand, right?
I haven't washed my hand since. But then I had the great opportunity for working in San Francisco City Hall for then President David Chu. He was the president of the Board of Supervisors. He's now city attorney of San Francisco. He actually won an election to work at the state assembly. So I went to the state assembly with him for a little while, but was so obsessed with working at the local government, I eventually went back to work for President London Breed. And those who know the history of San Francisco, during my time there, our late mayor, Ed Lee, tragically passed away. And overnight, I became a person who was working for the mayor, which was then Mayor London Breed. And in terms of the projects, I'll talk a lot more about the local level because I feel like that's where
Sure, please. Yeah.
It's the most exciting to me. San Francisco, as many people know, is like ground zero for many things. The housing crisis, tech disrupt, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes right now.
She's
Disruption.
doing air quotes, folks. She's talking about apps.
Talking about all the apps and the technology, and the urban planning fights that like went on till like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And so I got my hands into a lot of things. Some of these industries won't be happy for me to hear this, but I am proud to have like banned a lot of things. I abolished a lot of things. So, including like water bottles on city property and events and the sale of styrofoam in the city, which, fun fact, styrofoam is actually the name of the company, I think. Like, it's not.
It's a Kleenex kind of tissue thing.
Yeah, it's a Kleenex situation. It's a Q-tip situation. We got rid of a lot of things. We tried to sort of regulate a lot of things, but we also created a lot of things. That was like my favorite part about working at local government, whether it was like affordable housing developments that prioritized lifelong residents who lived in that particular neighborhood. That was a very hard fight. Or urban agriculture zones that allowed community gardens on property that was to be developed in a couple of years. Like, there are some things and really creative uses that you could do at the local level pretty much overnight. Like, for instance, that urban agricultural zone legislation, that probably took us 2 months to pass.
Yeah. Blink of an eye.
Blink of an eye compared to, what you see at different levels of government. At the state level, it took a year to 12 years to pass legislation, and then let alone implementation. But I will also say at the local level, we worked on some of the trickiest challenges when it came to working in collaboration with tech and the community. And that includes regulating Airbnb. So the first piece of legislation, policy regulation on the books, was in San Francisco during my time in the city. Scooters, micro mobility options coming to San Francisco. Lime Scooter got kicked out of San Francisco for a good period of time. And tech shuttles, and the list goes on. So, as it was pretty incredible, but it was also grueling, and it was a hell of a way to make an impact for sure.
Yeah. So you had, on one hand, amazing opportunity to impact people, make their lives better. On the other hand, you had screaming constituents, complaining when there's, a puddle on the street. What pushed you to jump to the private sector?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the constituents yelling. I promise it wasn't that, although they made a really good case for it. It was actually my role in sort of what I mentioned earlier, in like regulating and negotiating and collaborating with the private sector, that opened my eyes. It just was a recognition that, or an understanding actually, that the private sector just had a really big role to play in making communities better, and that there are absolutely limits to what the public sector can accomplish alone. So, I found companies, thankfully, that knew that collaboration with government was key to their success, or were at the very least like curious about it. And so they were interested in bringing in people like me to help them sort of navigate government and navigate how to interact with the community. And so, that's kind of why I hopped into it. I just sort of needed a sign, honestly, that I could either spend another 10 years in government, or I can try and see what this is. And when our mayor passed away and we saw a lot of the sort of political infighting and chaos that ensued from that moment, that was sort of my sign that let's try something else.
Try something else.
Yeah.
And I do think, to your point, like, so many startups and even larger companies like don't understand how important it is to be collaborative with government, especially on something like transportation and mobility that touches every citizen and uses the right of way that's publicly controlled. I don't know if you saw this, when Jeffrey Tumlin, who headed up the SFMTA,
Yeah.
did like an exit interview, was talking about Cruise and how the execs there like came in his office and like pounded their fists like, you're the biggest impediment to self-driving cars. And it's like, that's not going to make things work faster. And they're being an impediment because people need to know it's safe, and they need to know you're going to follow traffic laws and not hide the evidence when you run someone over.
Right. Exactly.
All good rules.
All good rules. I would also say that it's important to acknowledge that some of these rules are on the books for a very important reason, and there's also reason to question them and to evolve, right? Like to make sure that we're evolving with them. And I think that in some ways is like the big scary thing for both public entities and private entities is there's a moment in which the system may not be working exactly as it should, and we have to work together in order to do that. But they're sort of like a tragic mismatch in terms of how folks go about it, right? Like I think that government ends up trying to overcorrect itself in some ways, or just moves so incredibly slow that they're actually like behind on the ball on this thing. Or there's, the sort of like innovative visionary founder who just wants to sort of disrupt the crap out of everything.
Yeah.
Not naming names.
No,
yeah.
Never. But speaking of naming names, so some of the companies you worked with in the past, I think interesting, well-known names: WeWork, Reef, Replica. Some of them did better than others. What sort of issues did you help them navigate?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is not for every single one of these companies, but it's almost like they knew that they needed somebody who understood government and who understood the community, but they didn't quite know how it was going to fit into their ROI. Like they didn't know how this investment was. And a lot of companies don't, actually. I think there's a lot of companies who know that they need sort of advice or actual operations on the ground to help with expansion, either on the government side or with the community buy-in side, but they're not exactly sure like what they're pointing to or what they need. And so in some ways we were defining that for them. So for WeWork, on a more obvious level, they rely heavily on permits and are really subject to zoning restrictions, and they wanted to do a lot of creative things. But a less obvious and a more, I would say, like softer power that we had was that they really needed community partnership and buy-in in order to fill the spaces that they were building, right? Like you can put an office park in an office location somewhere, but unless there's an employer that's actually like partnering with you and coming in, you don't have a product. And so in some ways what we were doing, in addition to the zoning and permitting sort of legislative advocacy, we were building partnerships that made WeWork more meaningful in those communities. So like an example of that in San Francisco was we had a WeWork location that was smack dab in the middle of the Tenderloin. So if anybody knows the Tenderloin, it's a really tough spot. It's great. It's great on transit, but there are a lot of
great banh mi access.
Great banh mi access. Great food.
Shout out to Saigon sandwiches.
Shout out to Saigon sandwiches and shout out to Dottie's best breakfast ever. And I was, having like been a San Francisco native for the most part, I was very comfortable with being in the Tenderloin. But to bring in new folks who are coming into a WeWork, it was just a different experience for them. And so we ended up partnering with organizations like Urban Alchemy and the Glide Foundation and a whole host of community-based organizations that were actually servicing the area and needed an office space and needed actual like close proximity and kind of specific access to either that local community or the office. And so we just needed a human being, right, to like understand what was happening in that community and really build a partnership that made sense for them. And as a result of that, we filled the space and we were able to both beautify the surrounding community and create meaningful workforce opportunities for folks in that particular area. And it was great. I would love to look back at it and see how that location is doing, if it's even there anymore, given all the drama that's going on mid-market. But that was a cool project.
Yeah, and that's a great example of how GR can almost kind of bleed into biz dev.
Totally. And bleed into biz dev is like a really good point, because there is traditional sales, there's traditional sort of business development and expansion strategy, which matters. There's a whole economic sort of market component to that. And then there's like the policy and community component to that. And for somebody like Replica, we ended up doing a great deal of what I call like policy driven business development. And that means like really understanding where the policy opportunities were and how you can marry that with the need for what Replica's product was, which is really granular mobility data. And so you pair the policy priorities with the product, and you all of a sudden have something really great. So yeah, that's been kind of a new development in the GR world, I would say.
Yeah. That's always on the bleeding edge, right?
Right.
And so then you weren't satisfied with that. You said, I want an even bigger challenge. I want to start my own policy strategy GR shop, right?
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I was probably alluding to all of this in what I was saying about working in the private sector and the public sector, but there is really nobody who's like investing in bringing the two sectors together. And so for us, like we knew that you could unlock real solutions by actually getting those two sectors together to really understand what their interests are, what the challenges are, and sort of like use the other's superpowers to unlock some of that goodness. And so obviously on the public sector side, there's scale, right? Like there's institutional knowledge. There's sort of like an understanding of what's worked historically and what doesn't work. And then at the same time, there's the private sector who has a lot of agility, right? Like, and can be really innovative and sort of on the cutting edge of technology. When you marry those things together, you get a solution that could be lasting and enduring and eventually institutionalized, as opposed to sort of like pilots here and pilots there, and let's just see if the market will take hold. It could be a lot more powerful. And so we decided to build a firm that really invests in that bridge. And so we like to say that, you know, we're building the bridge between the public and private sector. And what we're really doing is we have public sector clients and private sector clients, all who are trying to navigate one another. And mostly on the private side, really providing like fractional public affairs, government affairs support so that they could, you know, expand on the business development side and to sort of de-risk the market for them as well.
Helping them navigate their first dance. You know, everyone's so awkward at the prom. Just take one from public side, one from private side, and you two go dance together.
Like you could do it. You could really do it.
You got feet. You can do it.
Exactly.
What kind of clients do you aspire to work with? What sort of projects are you looking to take on? Like what's a dream project for you now?
Yeah, I love this question. I think so. There's public and private, but on the private side, like the best kind of folks to work for are the innovators and the problem solvers who are creative and ambitious enough to work with the public sector. So I say that because there are huge ambitions, right? To like create whole new apps to solve a specific problem, but the ambition doesn't go far enough to sort of what I said earlier, to sort of like institutionalize it in the public. Sure. In the public sphere.
It's got to leave your phone.
It's got to leave your phone. It's got to be accessible to the masses. It's got to be relevant to all types of folks. There is a whole nother sector of the world, right, that is outside of the private sector, and that's in the public realm. So anyone who is ambitious enough to do that are definitely folks that we want to work with. I would say that our clients have mostly been in the mobility and the built environment space, just because, you know, it makes a lot of sense. You actually have to work with government for that, for your product to take off, but not all. There's a lot of folks in the GovTech space that I think are doing really interesting stuff and meaningful stuff. Bonus points if you find ways to solve a specific problem using existing hardware or existing infrastructure. So, you know, like one of our clients that we're really excited about is Circuit. They are all electric, on-demand micro transit, right?
Yep,
like there's
yep.
nothing new about a shuttle. There's nothing new about a shuttle, but they have done it in such a thoughtful and obviously like cleaner way that I think they've been able to get some buy-in from a lot of folks who, you know, previously haven't been able to adopt something like this. So I think there's just stuff like that. And then there's, you know, these really big, ambitious, this is not one of our clients, but really ambitious projects like Dream Star Lines. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
But using existing rail to create an overnight sleeper, like chef's kiss, just, and nobody wants to fly anymore. We've seen the planes falling out of the sky, right? Like,
yeah, it's much safer to be on a train that tips over than a plane that falls from the sky.
Yes. And in a luxury sleeper, nonetheless.
You won't even wake up. Yeah.
Exactly. But like to sort of distill that private side client, it's like, yeah, many of the folks are in the Curbiverse, you know, like your
yes,
universe of things.
They're fellow herbivores. Yeah.
Right.
So what would you say are some of the misconceptions that startups have about public policy, or what are things that they get wrong?
Oh my gosh. I don't want to say like so many things, but
Kids gloves.
yes. I would say that one sort of common mistake is that the time to common sort of like the wrong thinking, I want to say, is that the time to bring in a policy advisor or a GR team is later in the game. You know,
once something's gone wrong.
Once something's gone wrong, is like we need crisis management and we need to respond, you know, to a particular incident. And of course, this is long after you've developed your MVP and your like actual product. And this is a misconception because obviously reacting to a policy hurdle after you've invested all of this R&D and, you know, business development, sold products, that's like one of the most expensive mistakes a startup can make. Sure. And, you know, mostly because there's a whole nother side to the business landscape that you hadn't considered yet, right? And so if you're sort of reacting to that other side of the world, which is the public sector, I think you're up for an uphill battle. So that's one of them. I think another is that the complexity of government is in its politics and the complexity is in its bureaucracy. Yes, those things are true. But political interests and like bureaucracy are just like the surface level of what makes the public sector work or not work. It really goes down to the individual human level. And so that's why it matters. Like, who is in leadership? Who is their staff? Have they been sort of long-standing folks who understand, who can carry through administrations and past issues? Because at the end of the day, this is still like a people-led business. And so the deeper understanding you have and the connectivity you have with people, the more success you're going to have. It is possible to sort of win a city over despite its seemingly like gridlocked politics and its bureaucracy. I think like some folks write off certain communities because of that reason, but it is possible. And then the last is kind of like this, similar to the two I last mentioned, which is that collaboration with the public sector slows you down. It actually speeds you up. It actually can accelerate the work that you do. And it can get ahead of the expensive problems that you're going to run up against in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's well said. And I think too many people in the tech space don't understand why so many of the regulations and rules and policies were put in place, and that they were in response to actual problems. And maybe those problems don't affect you as Mr. Tech Guy, but exactly. They're well-intentioned. And yes, maybe they could be updated or reformed or rethought, but that doesn't mean you should just take a hammer to them and break everything, because then you end up with something that works even less.
That's right.
So
and there are
you got to be collaborative.
You got to be collaborative, but you also have to find the champions. There's not a lot of they're hard to find sometimes within agencies, but there are folks within agencies that are truly just in government because they want to make government better. And they're chipping away, and they're making headway on the leadership side. And those are the kinds of people that we want to partner with and that we want to see succeed, right? And so to the extent that we, on the private side, can partner with those champions internally in the public sector, we'd be all the better for it. They're out there.
Well said. Sam, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Very interesting. I think we learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to engage with the public. Community engagement is not a bad word. The era of move fast and break things is over, but that doesn't mean that you can't make progress quickly. So thanks for letting me share that message. And hope to hear how this resonates with your folks.
Yeah. Make don't break, folks.
Make don't break.